And just a reminder, if you would like to ask something or share something or bring something up and you'd rather it wasn't recorded and made public, then let me know and I'll press the pause on the record. Gareth.
So it's a multiple part question. It might be the part that you're going to cover in talk tomorrow, because it's about one of the names that's still to come.
Okay.
So it's about
duty. Duty, yeah.
Duty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just this kind of ongoing question for me of like how to relate to that sense of beauty to an image, and the word that's coming up is destiny. That was what was coming through this afternoon, and that sparked a whole load of questions about autonomy and free will and timelessness and emptiness as well, and how to relate the kind of understanding or experience of emptiness to the image, but also the duty, and also how that duty, if it shifts over time, if it changes, or if the duty itself is timeless, and how to feel into what aspects of that duty require action, and what are kind of that quality of just participation in that image feels like duty in and of itself. And then it felt like just all the nodes I could think of somehow coalesced around this, and that got me thinking around, is that a quality of the nodes that each one somehow, sort of one picket, contains the others, and is that what you mean by the lattice in that first node?
Okay. So Gareth has a question about duty. Just kidding. Is that really just the first part, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try and say something. See how it lands, and then see if you have more or. Okie doke. So, start at the end. Yeah, the nodes of the lattice, or what we're calling the nodes of the lattice, they reflect each other, they imply each other, they contain each other, they also complement each other. So some of them have this, like, as a kind of, they're almost like different sides, or they drag each other in. Yeah. So when you have a sensing with soul, like the kind of thing you're talking about, everything you said, I would expect. I would expect just these questions and just this unfolding. The word destiny comes up. We haven't mentioned it, but I would expect it to come up. Something happens when we work with an image, with this sensitivity, with enough openness of logos, like Catherine was talking about, enough conceptual framework, that it starts growing. It starts expanding. More and more elements of existence, not just of ourselves, but of existence, get woven in and sensed with soul and caught up in that whole eros-psyche-logos dynamic. So then there's image, and there's this in some way or another, there's a sense of duty, not just where there's image, actually where there's any soul-making. So, for example, we just briefly talk about something that's not image, let's say a jhana, okay? It's the quieting of images. When you first open to a jhana, at first, it's very rare for someone authentically to say, oh, well, that was nice. and it comes with a sense of duty. It's like, wow, look at what is possible. Look at this vista that has opened up in terms of a realm of consciousness. At the minimum, my duty would be something like, well, I need to explore this more. I need to practice more. I need to find out more. Maybe I need to go beyond this. Maybe I need to share this with others. Yeah. So anytime there's a stretching of the psyche in a way that feels meaningful to us, we have some kind of sense of duty with it. And with an image, that can, as you said, be manifest in different ways. So this is really important. Everything, all the parts of the first part of your question, they really do intersect. So the danger in duty is a fundamentalist religious terrorist, isn't it? I have this. It sounds like divine and this and that, and I'm on fire with it, and my duty is to kill or whatever it is. It missing completely, well, quite a lot actually. But one of the things missing is this: we participate, we assent. There's this create, discover, and imaginal middle way. So if I think about some of the things that have actually any instance of duty that I might feel in relation to something soul-making or some image or sensing with soul, it can feel actually like the most important thing in my life, that duty, but I still feel real or not real. It's still got that kind of that amplitude of the breadth of the middle way ontology, the middle, yeah. And so that for me is really key, you know. So this is, again, it's something we notice. So we can think, it's important to think about it and talk about the concepts, but I think one of the things I'm trying to emphasize about the nose, one of the aspects is that we notice them. So you start to, in whatever order it comes in, you notice a sense of duty, but then you'll also notice this middle way. You know, if there's the sensitivity, if there's the delicacy, if there's the energy body there, if there's the openness, all the rest of it, you see. So we can kind of have this notion of duty, and then something gets cut off, and then we engage this question about duty. I'm not saying this is what's happening to you, but we engage it on a purely intellectual level. So, and that's important. So part of this business of what I'm saying, everything gets subsumed into soul making, including the intellect. I point up here, it's not really up here, it's everywhere, isn't it, intellect? So including the conceptuality, but you can also use your body and your sensitivity and your mindfulness and your attention. You will discern this sense of, yes, this duty that feels so touching to the soul, so calling. And I say again, for me, it feels like the most important, those duties are what feel like the most important things in my life. And, you know, I've said this somewhere or other before, but one of the things that brings me equanimity, in a deep equanimity in relation to possibly dying soon and cancer, is the sense that I'm on track with my duty. And I have tried to do my duties, plural. And that does something to the whole sense of existence and life and death. It's not everything, but it's immense to die with that sense. Do you understand? But I would never try to convince anyone else that what I sense as my duty is some kind of independently objective fact in the universe. It's something, as you said, I participate in. To go back to the nose today, I discover that duty. And yes, it can change over time, curiously. So that I can think of certain images I just shared recently in a talk that, you know, long time images that in the dance of life and image and in the infinite echoing and reflection of those have transformed over time. So the duty is different. But that wasn't something I decided to change. It was like, there's a bit, that one's a bit, sad. So let's kind of change it a bit. It was something that evolved in this dance, in this sort of mysterious, infinite echoing of life and relationship in life with and that image and the sense. So the sense of duty actually began to change. It's like the same image evolved naturally in the process of soul making, not because I came and said, I think it would be better if, or I'd have less dukkha if, or it would, be an easier journey for me if I change the image and change the sense of duty with it. Does that make sense? So yes, it can evolve like that. Yes, there's always this sense of participation, and yes, there's always this sense of free will, which is when I was talking very quickly I can't remember when it was it last night, with the autonomy. And one of the things I was trying to stress is that we always have a choice with soul-making. And it cannot happen without without some sense of my autonomy and my freedom to say, no, I'm not going to do that duty. I'm not going to engage this image. I'm not going to follow this eros. I'm not going to listen to that calling, or I am. Yeah. So there's always this sense of actually both the autonomy of the image. Something is asking something from me. Something calls me, wants something from me. A lot of psychology, it would be, we're working with imagination. What can I get from it? Yeah. And that's all part of it. That's part of it. But there's a kind of, to me, a whole deeper, more beautiful territories, landscapes, vistas, dimensions that can open when we also ask the other question: what do you want from me? And that's, in a way, it's a bigger ask. But so this kind of autonomous image, it's me, but it's not me. It's part of me, but it's beyond me, and it wants something from me and from my life. But I always have my autonomy. And so not only am I not going to be kind of, possessed in some way where I'm just doing this zombie thing or whatever, but also I can... what I was going to say. Also, I can say no. That wasn't what I was going to say. It doesn't matter. And there was another part of. There was some important part. Let me just see. Yes. And there was something else. Okay, so the destiny, I know what it was. So two things. Yeah, destiny, we'll hold on to that for a sec. And discerning what the duty is. So a lot of this work, if I think back over my sort of journey with this kind of exploration, at the beginning it was all very clunky and kind of describing it to others might have sounded like very dramatic, sort of pretty dramatic images or whatever, and this, kind of journeying process in a landscape with dragons and all that kind of stuff. As it progresses, I think, and this applies to other meditations as well, like emptiness, and everything gets more subtle, and we grow in sensitivity and delicacy. So the question of duty, take that religious fundamentalist terrorist, it's anything but subtle. Blowing yourself up in a bus station is not a subtle gesture at all. It's all very reified, and the sense of duty and what the duty is. So the duty with an image can be all the way to just, my duty is to behold it, and to be touched by it, and to be open to it, and to have that sense of mystery. And in my heart, even though I might not physically bow, something is bowing. Something has that reverence. That's the duty. So sometimes it's just that, and no one else knows anything about it, and no one else can see any obvious manifestation in your life. You've just been touched by the poetry of something, and it's between me and the image, me and the divine, me and existence. Other duties manifest more concretely in the life, but I would be a little suspicious of ones that reflect too kind of accurately the image, So, for example, one, and I've shared in lots of talks, one image for me is this kind of solitary soldier. That's one of the ones that's changed. It's really not that present much anymore. But for a long time it was there. Now I would. The last thing I would want to do is join the army. It's really not my cup of tea, and I was never into fighting. I didn't even like rugby and all that stuff. So but I can see in my life how how combative I am when I need to stand up for something or some vision or sensibility that feels encroached, or some kind of care that feels encroached socially, politically, or in a certain scene. So there's, I can see it mirroring that way, but I'm certainly not driving spears through anyone or that kind of thing. So there's a kind of reflection there, but it's not. Do you understand? How to discern? I don't know that I have an answer to that really, but maybe it's something to do with this, the other note of the infinite echoing and mirroring. So that there's the, actually, and this maybe ties in the destiny. There's a sense of my life, my choices, my actions, my behavior, and the image, and they mysteriously echo each other, so that as everything gets more and more subsumed in soul making, which means everything, my body, my intellect, my sense of my journey, my dukkha, the cosmos, the sense of God or Buddha nature, materiality, relationship, everything, then more and more we get this echoing sense, this infinite mirroring. And it's, like I said, again, I'm not sure when, was it yesterday, we can conceive, a normal way of conceiving images in our wider culture would be something happens in my life, or something exists in my psyche, and the psyche generates the image of that. It's a result, it's a representation. We can play with a conception the other way round. My life is generated by the images. The image is primary in that sense. Does that? Yes? Begins to say, what's my destiny? Is my destiny somehow, and we tie this in with the autonomy, not given so much as I'm offered something. I'm offered something, and that thing might be a really difficult thing. It might be really really dukkha, or it might not. It might be something really lovely. But it comes, so I have to say yes to that. So this cancer could just be cancer. It could just be death. It could just be pain. It could just be, or it can be sensed with soul. It can be, so that's not a destiny so much as an offering. Do you want to pick this up and sense it with soul? And then it becomes a destiny. We make it, we soul make. Do you understand? So again, even the sense of destiny is created, discovered. We participate in it. We retain our autonomy, and yet there's something possibly calling us. And all of that is both a kind of concept and an image, really, of life, a sensing the soul of life, but also conceptual ideas that arise. You said it, I didn't say it yet. It arises generally. It arises out of the alchemical process of soul making. I would expect these things to get everything will get woven in. Soul wants to grow. Soul, as I said sometime or other, loves soul making, and will just reach out and draw in everything into that process. Do you understand? How's that for the first part? Is
That's really good. Thank you so much. So if I just put out there the kind of general the second part, and then do you want to? I don't want it to sort of dominate the whole Q&A.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a big one, and it sort of it shades into some of what you just said. It's about evil.
Evil, yeah.
So
I wonder if other people would. I'm not sure about. I don't know what to do.
Evil is interesting.
Okay.
So it might be a much smaller one actually, and so it's just about. So I get that sense in some images they're clearly dark, and they're sometimes. I have had that experience of them being quite terrifying.
Yeah, yeah.
But also there's, like when I feel into them and give them time and space, the loving and being loved and the trust.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of overall benevolence that feels present in the imaginal work, particularly as in this framework that Catherine described. And then, so I just kind of wonder about, and I'm thinking about a particular person who experiences or has experienced images that just feel evil, that just feel like there's no benevolence. And how to help, I suppose, is one question. And somehow it feels like this way of practicing is like there's a sense of blessing, like a dark image comes and working in this way is like is blessing the image, and there's that echoing and mirroring. And then the other thing that's coming through is like the way Ajahn Full and lots of the Thai forest masters would help people when they had in that logos possession or spirits. And it feels like there's some elements of this practice, like the love and care, that they would encourage. Whether that's the same thing or, then obviously there's like a whole area of sort of mental health and schizophrenia, etc.
Sure.
Conditions in that way. Sorry, that's a little bit. It just felt really important.
Yeah. So the questions about evil and images that feel evil, and then images that are terrifying, but not necessarily, or dark, but not necessarily evil. And how does it fit in with mental health and other cultures where they're much more comfortable? People believe in spirits and spirit possession and that sort of thing. So I can just say for me, I can't say about your friend because they're not here and I haven't met them and I don't know. If I'm with someone who's agitated, that in some kind of way that maybe suggests something like that, I guess for me as a teacher, have a certain sense of whether there's a possibility there to convert an image, even if it seems evil and terrifying, for that to become imaginal. And we talked about this spectrum. On one side, papancha and that kind of the reification of that, the clinging of that, the terror of that. So sometimes people might come with something that's really disturbed them, but there's something in either how there's something in what they're saying that shows me a possibility, and then we can work together and with a lot of this. And other times, and I can think of several examples where a person wants to work with the imaginal, but I can see they're really not ready. They don't have that capacity yet, And so I would say absolutely not for you yet. And they might need other kind of help, etc. The part of our conceptual framework is that the image is a dependent arising, like everything else. So it arises how the image is and whether it seems evil or, as you say, it can be dark. And this is really, really important if you haven't got this yet. An image can be dark and involve dukkha, but yet have that love in it somehow, and the beauty and it feels soul-making. Really, really important to know that. There's the light side and the ethereal side of soul, and there's the dark side, and there's not any greater beauty in one or greater soulfulness. This is really, really important. So there's that range of what an image kind of, I don't know, the texture, the tonality of an image, let's say, in terms of light and dark in the broad sense of what those words mean. But in our conceptual framework, in our logos, the image is always a dependent arising. That's partly what the lattice is saying. It's saying that the image, it does have a certain autonomy, but at the same time, when we talk about the imaginal or what's imaginal, we're talking about the whole thing, the whole mix, gestalt of all the lattice, some of which seems objective and some of which seems part of me, subjective. So that, like when we talked about trust, it's like if I can just sprinkle a grain of trust there, the image changes. the image will become less threatening, because I've now put something into the alchemical vessel called trust. I've put this substance called trust into the alchemical vessel, and the alchemy of what then happens is changed. Do you understand? But the other, what Catherine mentioned today, logos, is also one of the nodes, so that actually what arises depends on the conceptual framework. So in a culture like Thailand, for example, Jamphwang and those guys, in Thailand, they live and breathe, they're brought up with a conceptual framework of spirits and ghosts and possessions and all kinds of stuff. And so when they have a certain experience, they are bringing, even the least intellectual person there is bringing that whole logos, not as a whole big articulated philosophy, but just kind of implicit. And that colours the experience too. Now, if that's not shiftable, so Ajahn Fuang is not going to sit down and teach them about dependent rising and all that stuff necessarily, but he will introduce something like love. And so again, the node in our language, the node of love, is again something I notice, but also something that I can bring. My loving the image, it's like the trust, and it starts to change something. Yeah, it's because the image is a dependent rising, but also the conceptual framework. So again, if in my conceptual framework there's the idea of it as a dependent arising, there's the just for a little bit entertaining the idea that soul has treasure for me, that there's something redeemable in what appears dark and what is dukkha. And redeemable doesn't always mean making what's dark light. It means seeing the light, seeing the beauty and the soul in the dark. Do you understand? But that's part of the conceptual framework. The idea of dependent arising is part of the conceptual framework. The idea of do you understand? So in some situations, you simply can't change the conceptual framework. It's too big a job. Someone asked me, can you recommend some talks that explain the conceptual framework? Well, yeah, but they're quite long. It's the thing about conceptual is quite late. It's quite heavy. It's heavy machinery. A lot of it's unconscious. But eros is something that can flicker up very quickly and die down very quickly. Image can flicker, but tends to stay around a bit longer. Logos is like it's slower. And some of the logoi that we have, they're really entrenched, and we don't even realize we have them, like about what matter is, or about what the universe is. We've inherited that from hundreds of years of Western culture. Not everyone has that, or all kinds of things, So that's the slower piece in all of this. So it's hard to sit down with someone and kind of just get them to change their conceptual frame. After a while, with this kind of business, you can just go into seeing things with this concept. Like someone asked me, it's a ghost, yeah. Where was I? Someone asked me about something, and it's become almost in time when concept and conceptuality and the thinking mind and logos gets involved with soul, then it ignites it, it fertilizes it, it makes it active, it will push out, it will expand, it will gain complexity, and it will also gain flexibility, so that it becomes quite possible, to just change a conceptual framework right in the moment. I just see it this way. I'll just conceive of it that way. So going back to your thing about duty, I'll just conceive of it given to me as destiny. Or I'll conceive of, no, I'm completely autonomous and, or something else. So that becomes, with practice, really quite flexible. You can just step in and out of different conceptual frameworks. But the main point here is that, the image and the tonality in terms of evil, good, benevolence, dark, like the tonality, the image arises as a dependent arising, dependent on concept, affect, trust, sensitivity, energy, body awareness, love, Yeah, we participate. You can't not participate, and it's just a matter of realizing the kind of full beauty and extent and depth of the participation we have. Is that okay? Okay. So it's 6:32 or something. Okay, just a little bit.
There's something in the notes. The non-believers must feel bad about it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Could I
Jill,
change your mind and say I'd like to be part of the notes?
the notes, you're here. Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, so actually, let's go to Jill's question. So,
Shall I just say it?
oh, sure.
So, I'm interested in node 3. Node 3, loving and being loved.
Yeah,
That was the question.
yeah.
How that works.
How that works. Okay.
So, especially the being loved.
Yeah. So if I wanna, how does the node to do with love work? Especially the being loved by an image, or being loved by something or other that we sense with soul, which could be a tree or whatever it is. Yeah. When you ask how does it work, Jill, do you mean what's the sort of conceptual mechanism there, or how do I recognize it? How do I?
You could say a little bit about both.
Okay, all right. So, how do I recognize it? We'll take the second one first. Some images are just obvious because it's just grandma that's just kind of hugging you, or some actually images just tell you, "I love you." And it, again, we said, what does the image want? It wants you to know that you're loved. It wants you to know, wants to communicate this love. And your duty, if we go link it, we can. My duty is to see that and recognize it and let that in. Yeah. So that's very obvious, and it could be sexual, sexual, erotic love, and but it could manifest in all kinds of different forms, more or less obviously. But again, if we link it to something we said with Gareth, a lot of what happens is the whole feel of things can expand its range to include what's a lot more subtle. So it's interesting, I'm with this tree or whatever it is. Maybe it's a real tree, a physical tree, or I have an image of some kind of stone. How do I have to kind of be very delicate in my attention. So it's not obvious. It's not going to do something obvious in terms of its communication. I mean, it might actually, because the tree could speak or something. But sometimes the range of things just gets more subtle. So that means we just have to be quite delicate and open about how we might feel that. One interesting thing is so everything's interconnected. So it might be some other node that starts to ignite this node. But it might also be this node's really a pair, loving and being loved. So if you communicate your love somehow or other, in words, in gesture, in image, it might then, in the reciprocity of things, in other words, your love ignites its love. And then it becomes more visible. So sometimes the communication acts as a kind of alchemical spark. Okay? Yeah. So I don't think there's an exact answer so much as just to know that it can get really, really subtle. Does that make sense? The conceptual mechanism, in a way, it's part of the sense of the autonomy of the image. So, in other words, this image has personhood in the sense that it has soul. So it has its own sensibility, its own way of knowing, its own intelligence, its own affect, its own love, its own eros. It desires you. Yeah. So there's. It's totally, yeah. So again, this is something that we could have played another game on this retreat, which is just given some instructions and I could have had a sealed envelope, like they do on some game shows or whatever, and it would have the nodes in it. And you would each have a sealed envelope. And I would just wait, if it was a longer retreat, just wait in interviews for you to come and report which node. So it's something that you'd notice, right, in kind of the mystical unfolding. But it's something we can also activate as well. Yeah. How does it happen? It happens because let's relate it to what Catherine shared about the soul-making dynamic, this eros-psyche-logos. Here's an image, which we're calling as part of psyche, okay, as image. And that image has something beautiful and attractive to it. And in feels like here arises my eros. There's something I'm drawn to this image, or I want to feel out in it, or there's some kind of desire, dynamic that wants to kind of be more intimate with it, inhabit it more, or touch it more, or know it more, or you understand that? That's what we could call eros. If the logos decides that, an image is just for example, it's just some brain neurons firing, it's just some nonsense. Nothing's really going to happen with that. It might give you an idea of what you might chase in life, but you'll have to go looking for it out there. If, though, the logos and the sensibility allow a kind of expansion, what happens is the image itself starts to get more rich and more deep and more imaginal, more multifaceted, and it starts to come alive really through this kind of dynamic of eros, which is looking for more. Eros is always looking for more, not in a problematic way. If it's allowed to expand, if the image is allowed to expand, and as the image expands, it begins to feel like some of these things that Gareth says. It begins to feel like it's asking me something, and it's loving me, and it's got this dimension and that dimension, and this aspect and that aspect. And do you understand? So the wanting more, it's like it inseminates something, and it starts to expand. And because the logos allows it to, because the logos, we're starting with the logos saying, just maybe there's a treasure here. Maybe imagination has something, the imaginal has something of value, and maybe there's something to discover here. So, and then the logos can expand even more and so the image gains dimensionality, aspectedness, complexity, multifacetedness, all character, personhood. Does it make sense?
Then it starts to feedback.
Because, like a person, you then are in relationship, and just as with a person, you wouldn't say, you would grant them full personhood. You would only someone with some kind of cognitive incapacity would not be able to sense the personhood there, the fullness that there's eros there's love, there's intelligence, there's a kind of knowing, even if it's very different than what we're used to. So this image of a stone, it's like, how does this stone that has come so alive with soul, how does it know? It knows in a very different way than I know. It doesn't have all these fancy ideas and doesn't talk for hours on end.
But the stone would give back its stone.
Yes, precisely. It communicates, exactly.
However I perceive it.
Yes, yeah. So there's a resonance, and again, there's this kind of mirroring, infinite kind of mirroring of you and the stone, for example, or whatever. And it's very multi-leveled. It will just, rather than getting simpler and simpler, it gets more and more rich, more and more complex and diversified and multi-dimensional, multi-aspect. And then because of that, there's more for eros to fall in love with, and it's more. And there's a sense of, I see more, and I sense even more that I can only dimly, and that attracts the eros even more. So the eros kind of wants more. Things expand more and more and more, and that's actually infinite. And then everything starts getting, as I said at the beginning, caught up in the soul-making dynamics: self, other, sense of world, sense of eros itself. All of it is given this kind of, or sensed with soul, with holiness, dimensionality, all the rest of it. Does that? Yes. Okay, that's enough, huh? let's have some quiet time.
Thank you for listening. To learn how you can support the teachers and Dharma Seed, please visit dharmaseed.org/donate.